Hey everyone, Happy New Year. We are officially into the 20s now, and the first National Football League game of the 20s will feature the Buffalo Bills against the Houston Texans in the wild card round of the playoffs. I'm not going to dwell too much on this past weekend's loss to the Jets. The Bills lose 13-6. They finished the regular season 10-6. I don't think you should put too much stock into that game. I certainly don't. It doesn't really matter at all. You'll never really look back on it, I don't think. Even if you ever think about the Bills' 10-6 season, no matter what they do in the playoffs, if you think about this 2019, you're never going to remember that, so don't bother. There are maybe a couple things that happened that maybe have some sort of significance, and a couple of injuries, maybe a couple of performances by a couple of different players that maybe deserve some consideration for activation in the playoffs because they haven't played, most notably T.J. Yeldon and Duke Williams. I'll talk about both of those players and the injuries that were sustained. But the biggest story of this past weekend, I thought, across the league, it didn't really affect the Bills, maybe to a point if you believe in the butterfly effect and whatnot, is Miami beating New England. So New England falls to the 3. They have to play on Wild Card Weekend for the first time in I don't even know how long. They have never made the Super Bowl having to play on Wild Card Weekend, so I'm optimistic about that because maybe something that you're not even thinking about at this point is New England has a chance to match the Bills' record of reaching 4 straight Super Bowls, and that is something that I want to hold on to dearly. I don't care that the Bills lost all 4 of them. I just still want that record. And if the Patriots do it, they will have won at least 2 of them. I mean, they've won 2 of the last 3, so even if they were to reach and lose this year, they would be 2-2, and that would kind of nullify the Bills' 4 straight Super Bowl appearances as like a significant accomplishment because the Patriots would then have reached 4 and won at least half of them. So I would really love to see New England lose. I don't think a lot of people are really high on them, but I know I've talked about this the past couple weeks. You can just never rule them out. The great thing is if they win against Tennessee, they automatically have to go to Kansas City and play at Arrowhead, where they won the AFC Championship last year, but I think that game would heavily favor the Chiefs. And then if they get past that, depending on what happens with the Bills and, the Ravens and the Texans and whatnot, they might have to go to Baltimore. So, and if that doesn't happen, then they're going to be at home, right? I mean, if they beat Tennessee, if they beat Kansas City, unless it's Baltimore, they're obviously automatically at home because they'll be the highest seed rating. So let's just hope that doesn't happen. I'm not going to I don't look back on it and think like, oh my God, the Bills could have won the division. I think there's really good reason to believe that had the Patriots lost to the Bills the week before, that the Patriots would have maybe taken that game a lot more seriously. And not to say that they didn't take it seriously at all, but they had already wrapped up the division, and I'm sure they wanted to bye. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they wanted to bye. But if they hadn't wrapped up the division entirely, I think they might have won that game. But a lot of credit due to Brian Flores and Ryan Fitzpatrick. Brian Flores could honestly be Coach of the Year. Like, that team was 0-7, and they finished, what did they finish, 5-11? So they finished 5-4 down the stretch. Miami might be a decent team next year. There, I said it. They look like they're bringing in Chan Gailey to be their OC, to pair him back up with Fitz, whatever. Not going to talk too much about the other team there, but the Bills this week draw the Houston Texans. The last time they played the Texans was the 2018 season, the game that Josh Allen hurt his elbow in, and fortunately didn't end up needing Tommy John surgery. The Bills take the lead late on a Nate Peterman throw to Zay Jones, touchdown throw to Zay Jones, and then he essentially just gives it all right back with a pick 6. Houston wins the game, and Josh Allen misses like 6 weeks, and the season pretty much goes down the tubes from there. And I'm not gonna, the Bills are such a different team from then. I think Houston is relatively the same team, to be honest with you. They have a couple of different pieces here and there, but the Bills are a completely different team, so I think them losing 20-13 and having to play Nathan Peterman might give you a reason to be a little bit optimistic, but things change from year to year. The Texans, in terms of ranks and whatnot, were 14th in scoring, 19th in scoring defense. They were even on turnover differential for the year, right in the middle of the league there. 15th in passing, 9th in rushing, 29th against the pass, 25th against the run. Their big stories this week coming in are J.J. Watt being activated, which is, I mean, he tore his pectoral, and he's back. I think some people might have some HGH type of questions there, but I mean, look at the guy's arms. Like, those don't look natural at all. But I guess I don't want to make accusations here. I'm just saying it's a little weird, and it seems like something that could be re-injured very easily. But it's the playoffs, and I get it. He wants to play, so he's going to be in there. He might be matched up against Cody Ford or Ty Nsekhe if Nseke's able to play. He did re-injure that ankle, and the Bills got a little bit thin there on the offensive line. Especially late last week. Ford looked like he got a stinger maybe in his shoulder, and Nsekhe went down with the ankle again. Dion Dawkins had to go back in the game. Feliciano didn't go back in. Morse didn't go back in. Quentin Spain had to play the whole game, but fortunately he made it out healthy. It was just, I was happy to see like Trey White be inactive and Singletary. I was surprised Knox was inactive, despite the fact that he was, that they have a lot of guys at that position. And Sweeney played pretty well in his stead. But I just thought Knox, being a rookie, wouldn't get that type of treatment, I suppose. But maybe the Bills have big plans for him in the playoffs. I obviously want him healthy, because Croft only had 6 receptions this year. Lee Smith only had 4. Sweeney had 8, and I think 5 of them were this past week against the Jets. So, say what you will about the Bills using the tight end position. They did sustain injuries as well on defense. Levi Wallace with the ankle injury. That stinks. Not that I don't trust Kevin Johnson, who has seen the Texans before. He came from the Texans. He has seen Will Fuller, I'm going to talk about in a second, Will Fuller and DeAndre Hopkins in practice. So I would trust Kevin Johnson going in there, but I guess despite Levi Wallace's kind of mid-season struggles there, I would rather have him available, because now if something happens to Trey or if something happens to Kevin Johnson, the Bills were running into trouble there this past week against the Jets because Isaiah McKenzie had to play corner because they were putting Taron Johnson outside, and then he sustained a minor hamstring injury. He looks like he's fine, and Isaiah McKenzie had to go in there and play slot corner. So I don't think the Bills would end up in that type of position again, but they would have to resort to playing Saran Neal and Dean Marlowe probably on defense, who are nice depth players, but more special team players, guys you don't necessarily want to have to resort to defensively, especially against a team with, despite the fact that they finished really middle of the pack in terms of offense, the Texans have some firepower on offense. I love Deshaun Watson. He threw for 3,800 yards this year, 26 touchdowns, ran for another 7 on 400 yards rushing. So, I mean, he's a heck of a threat back there. Did not play last week. He had, I believe it was a lower back injury, maybe dealing with a bit of a foot injury. So if he's a little bit immobile, that's a huge story for the Texans, because he definitely relies a little bit on his legs. He had 82 rushing attempts this year. It's about 5 or 6 per game for him. It's just his escapability is huge for him. And, they didn't really necessarily do a terrific job protecting him this season. He was sacked on 8% of his dropbacks, 44 sacks on the season. So, I mean, they traded for Laramie Tunsil, and, it didn't really pay off. It didn't really pay dividends for them. I mean, they finished the season 10-6. They win their division. But here we are with Houston again. Houston always plays this Saturday 4:30 game. Oftentimes they've lost. I talked about this a little bit last week. They got embarrassed by Indianapolis last year. They beat the Raiders because the Raiders had to resort to their third-string quarterback. It's just a theme with them. They got embarrassed by Kansas City 30-0. So in the games that they haven't played, and I don't, Watson didn't play that game. I think it was Hoyer against Kansas City. So 2 of their last 3 playoff games, they've been outscored 51-7 at home. So this is kind of the matchup you want. This is the matchup the wild card teams really have been looking for the past couple of years. Houston is definitely, like I said, they're loaded with talent. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins, tremendous talent, maybe the best receiver in the league. I'd certainly listen to the argument. They're just a completely different team with Will Fuller in there, who's a first-round pick, really good talent in his own right. averages almost 14 yards per touch. That's second on the team to Kenny Stills, who's a little bit banged up hit as well. Stills and Fuller pretty much put up the same stats this year, 40 and 49 receptions, over 550 yards, 4 touchdowns for Stills, 3 touchdowns for Fuller. Fuller did miss 5 games, Stills missed 3. So they're like they're nice complementary pieces, certainly, to Hopkins, and it's the Fuller thing is just weird to me. Like, I looked at their expected points added, and with Fuller in the lineup, it's an absurdly positive number, and it escapes me at the moment, and I should have it, and I apologize. But with Fuller out of the lineup, it's negative. So, I mean, he matters. So maybe there's a thought process there, maybe you take your best corner, Tre'Davious White. Do you put him on Fuller? Is that insane? This might be insane. You want your best corner, your best player on their best player, probably try to take away Hopkins. He did have 5 catches and a touchdown last year against Trey White, and the touchdown was like a back shoulder, beautiful catch and touchdown. Really, you can't even play better defense, I don't think. But if Fuller matters this much to the offense, maybe there's something to taking Fuller out of the game, and maybe you can do that with your best player, and just kind of hope that Kevin Johnson, having seen, Hopkins in practice, can do something, can have some sort of success against him. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe it's just Greg, just put the Bills don't necessarily shadow all the time either, but maybe I'm just put your best player on their best player. I've seen a lot coming out of Houston. Fuller's actually might not even play, by the way, but it's trending like he's going to play, trending towards like he's going to play. I've seen some things out of Houston. About Duke Johnson. I see John McClain. I follow him on Twitter. Aaron Wilson as well. The matchup nightmare that the Texans can exploit is Duke Johnson in the passing game. Duke Johnson averages 4 targets for 3 catches and 25 yards receiving per game. I'm supposed to believe that's a matchup nightmare? These guys clearly know who's not getting any appreciation is Matt Milano. They're clearly not giving any credit to Matt Milano. They don't know that he was the best coverage linebacker in 2018. And, he allowed the best, I guess he had the best passer rating against amongst any linebacker according to Pro Football Focus last season. And I liked his game a lot this year too. I think he's really one of the more underappreciated players on the defense, maybe even defensively across the entire league, or at least the entire conference. I don't fear Duke Johnson. I think Duke Johnson's a nice player. I kind of wanted the Bills to go get him, to use him in that James White, T.J. Yeldon type of role. But they went and traded for Carlos Hyde once Lamar Miller was injured. And Duke Johnson just never took over that premier role, just like he never did in Cleveland. Carlos Hyde had a nice renaissance with them as well. He had 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. So, they can run the ball with Hyde. They can run the ball with Watson. They can complete passes to Hopkins. But I think they put so much stock into beating New England that one week that it kind of they had this big, huge emotional win against New England, and then they lose to Denver. They get killed by Denver the next week. They beat the Titans on the road, much to their credit, to take the division, and then need 5 turnovers from Jameis Winston to beat them by 1 score. Texans have been in 11 one-score games this year. I think 8 of their 10 wins are 1 score. So that's what I kind of alluded to last week. I think that they are more of an 8-8 team and a 10-6 team's body, or that doesn't mean that they can't beat the Bills on Saturday. But I've been struggling with how I want to pick this game because my heart is obviously telling me to pick the Bills, especially history based on Houston's history. It's tough. Houston's favored by 3. I do think the Bills can win this game. I'll pick the Bills to win. The Bills have played in a bunch of over half their games have been 1-score games in their own right. So despite Houston being favored by 3, the Bills are 9-5 against the spread, and I think Houston's under 500. So give me the Bills, 20-17 over the Texans, advancing to the second round of the playoffs. How they get there, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what to tell. I guess I don't really know what to tell you, what I think their game plan will be. But I think they're capable of doing it. I would like to see TJ Yeldon involved. I did say I'm going to go over a little bit on my usual 15 minutes because I did want to mention this. I would like to see TJ Yeldon play because I just mentioned him in that Duke Johnson type of role, James White type of role. I think he brings like an added dimension to the offense, and I think that like the Bills maybe not even would necessarily use, like kind of like how the Texans don't really use Duke Johnson, but I think his reputation sort of demands attention, and he hasn't been really on the field in a game with Allen since like week 4. So I would like to see them use him. I don't really need Sonoris Perry active for special teams. Just kick the ball out of bounds. I trust Saran Neal and Robert Foster as the gunners on punt teams. Just kick on kickoffs. Kick it out of the end zone every time. I know that they're capable. And Duke Williams would be the other one. So, yeah, a big-bodied wide receiver. He had a big drop this past week against the Jets, but 5 catches goes over 100 yards. Maybe 6 catches went over 100 yards against the Jets. That's the type of player that's not like John Brown, that's not like Cole Beasley. He's a bigger-bodied wide receiver, kind of on the outside, can come across the middle. Not even really like a stop and go. Brown has had a better route tree this year than he has had in years past, but not just a stretch the field type of player, like Brown can be. Not just the find the hole in the zone type of player that Beasley can be. I would like to see him play, and I don't know if maybe a playoff game is the right time to kind of unload him, but not a lot of him on film either. So let's see. I picked the Bills already. I picked the Bills to beat the Texans 20-17. I'm interested to see Josh Allen in his first playoff game. Of course, I like him in the dome. He's been good in domes a couple times in his career. Not so great against the Texans last year before he got hurt. But Minnesota and Dallas, I don't think he's really scared of the moment. So guys, let me know how you're feeling. Hit me up on Twitter. My Twitter handle and YouTube username are the same. Enjoy playoff weekend. Enjoy the new year. As always, above all else, go Bills.